Hi, everybody. I'm Frederique Began, and I would like to talk with you today a little bit about the importance of structure and routines with our kids. You know, so often we will see our children's bad behavior and we respond to it, negatively, and it leads to conflict. And we see that bad behavior, hi, babe, as the cause of the family conflicts. And while in sort of a narrow way, that's true, right? Everything's peaceful. Kiddo pushes for something, you say no. All of a sudden, they start to melt down, and now we have a big conflict. Really, we've set that into motion long before that moment. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we can do to make some big changes. This has been coming up a lot in my sessions in my office, so that's part of what prompted me to want to talk to you guys about it today. We live in a time and in a culture where we are so overcommitted, overstressed, overinvolved. We are spread very thin, and we are constantly running from one thing to another. So no day, no 2 days look the same. And in many ways, that's amazing. That's lovely. It keeps life a little bit more interesting. It's not so boring. You say routines to people and they go, oh, that's so mundane. I didn't want to be that soccer mom whose day looks, the same every day. And I'm driving around in my minivan, and who wants that? And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. But putting ourselves and what we want aside for a minute and going back to what kids really need, thinking about what kids really need, you have to remember this. Kids are learning their world. They are learning so much. They have to learn about themselves. They have to learn about their peers, what the world at large expects, what their family expects. And the more variable those expectations, the more overwhelming the world is going to be, the more likely you are going to have behavior problems. Not only do those variations make it hard for kids to really grasp very clearly what the expectations are. For some kids, it will make them quite anxious. A lot of these really strong-willed kids are deeply sensitive. They're really smart. And all that thinking and feeling and not quite knowing where to put it and not having what we call containment, right? So the structure around it causes a lot of anxiety. So that will lead to behavior problems too. Anxiety often gets manifested as bad behavior, temper tantrums, meltdowns, really fighting for control. In particular, control is an effort to offset that anxiety. So what these kids really need is some routine. The routine not only helps them better understand their expectations and decrease that anxiety, but it also sets up a consistency to that expectation, right? So even if my kids know very well how I feel, for example, around screens, I don't love screens. There's no doubt about that. They know that the expectation is less screens, period. But when one day they come home and I say, sure, you can get on the screens after school, no problem. And then the next day it's, no, absolutely not. We're not doing that. And then another day it's, well, maybe a little later, do this first and then you can do screens, right? They fully understand that the expectation is less screens, but the way I'm implementing it totally changes from one day to the other. And that's going to lead to enormous conflict. And I'll explain to you why. So I don't know if you've ever played the slots or if you've ever seen somebody play the slots, but kids are a lot like slot players in that when you play the slots, how often do you win? Pretty rarely, sometimes never. Sometimes you see that guy win and you're like, oh my gosh, he won. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to pull that lever again and again. Or I've been on it for 4 hours now. Statistically speaking, there's got to be a chance that, I'm getting closer to winning. And so you keep playing. And in clinical terms, we call that intermittent reinforcement. The idea that I could get it my way, that I could get that big win, keeps me playing, even if statistically, rationally, reasonably, I know that the chances are pretty slim. Kids are exactly the same way. So whenever we deviate from routines, whenever we change our expectations, or like I said, our expectations are the same, but the way that we implement them varies from one to the next, kids see that and in some ways rightly so, as an opportunity. They see it as an opportunity, a chance to get their will, to get their way in, especially these really strong-willed kids that are very invested in having some measure of control and some measure of power, like I said earlier, often to offset some feelings of anxiety. So, they come walk in the door. Let's say it's my kiddo walks in the door and says, "Hey, can I be on the computer?" And I say, "No, absolutely not. We're not doing that today." "But you let me do it yesterday." So first of all, he walks in thinking there's a good chance because I let him do it yesterday. And then when I say no, he doesn't understand all of the things that I'm thinking that make today different from yesterday. And if I try to explain my thinking, I'm engaging him in a way that gives some legitimacy to his request. And that's just going down a whole path that's not very useful. So when I say no and just stick with no, well, that seems really unfair. You're just saying no and you're not explaining it. And what? If, on the other hand, if I say, so here are our family rules, we'll stick with tech because tech is a big issue for people. And so this is, if you're going to, implement a routine, do it around tech, please. I think it's really, really important. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining us. So let's say I'm okay with my kids doing, I don't know, half an hour of screen. So video games or watching a show or whatever every day. Ideally, I have a very consistent routine around that. This is what time we start. This is what time we end. And we do that every single day, assuming that we're home. And if we're not home, then we have a routine around, yes, you can make up that time when we get home, or no, you can't. It's just done. The time is over. And while kids will initially push off against that, with time, they stop being those little slot players. They stop hoping for, well, if I just fight it, or if I just bat my eyelashes, or if I just say pretty please, I'll get my way. They know very clearly what to expect. Nope, this is how we do this in our family. The more things that you set up in a routine way, the fewer battles you will have. And it seems very simplistic, but it's incredibly powerful and incredibly true. So often we see our kids' bad behavior as the source of our conflicts, but really it's our lack of routine and lack of structure that's setting us all up for this. So again, this isn't about being rigid. That's not the goal here. In fact, with really strong-willed kids, the more rigid you are, the more forceful you are, the more likely you are to get into power struggles. But it is about setting up some healthy routines. So for example, in our house, we have some very clear morning routines and some very clear evening routines. And in between those, the days sort of vary, whether you have school, whether you don't, whether mom's working, dad's working, et cetera, et cetera. But those bookends are, not surprisingly, those parts of our day that are the smoothest, because everybody knows the drill. We know exactly how to transition into dinner, from dinner, up to bed, into bed. We do basically the same set of things every single day. And same thing with the start of the day. My kids do that super independently. Now they're a little older at 9 and 11. But I wake them up and downstairs I go and I go into my routine. They do their routine. We meet in the kitchen right before we have to leave for school. And it works really well because, again, it's the same thing every single day. And it's not something that you shove down somebody's throat. Hi, Lindsay. It's not something that you shove down. You have to do this or else. Just delivered in a very matter-of-fact way. I'm sorry, this is how we do this in our family. And again, if that is in fact how you do things, they will catch on and they will start participating, and they actually feel really supported and much more comfortable with those kinds of routines. And you don't have to engage in a battle convincing them or arguing with them. Nope, this is just how we do it. And day in and day out, you just keep restating, these are the routines, these are the approaches in our family, and they will start to get it. If you pick one source of conflict, so let's say, hi Tiffany, let's say it's, we'll stick again with technology because that's a really big theme. One source of conflict, so it's what time I have to leave my iPhone in the kitchen, or how long do I get to play after school? Do I get to play after school? And talk with your co-parent if you have a co-parent. Get really clear on what you want this to look like, what kind of a structure will work in your family. Sit down with the kids, explain to them that We've done it in variable ways in the past. That hasn't always worked. So we are now picking one routine. This is how it's going to look moving forward, and then implement it and stick to it, absolutely. I promise you that within 2 weeks, that one issue will stop being a huge fight. The kid will know the routine, you will know the routine, and you can go on to take on other challenges. So give it a try. Pick something that is a conflict that is absolutely exhausting and you're done with having it. Something that you can implement really consistently, that you can really stick to. Because again, if you deviate from the agreement, then kids latch right onto that. They say, hey, there was an exception yesterday, maybe there'll be an exception today. So something that you'll really be able to follow through on. Talk to your co-parent if you have one, make an agreement, and implement the new plan. Stick with it for 2 weeks. Hi, Beth. Hi, Julia. And let me know how it goes. As always, please share in the group how you've succeeded, what challenge you've taken on, what obstacles you've run into. If you run into obstacles, please let us know. We're happy to help. And I hope it will at least take one source of conflict out of your lives so that you can go back to enjoying those amazing kids. Thanks everybody for listening. So nice to see you. I'll see you next time. Bye.